Hey everybody! If you're like me, you might find it difficult to make friends. However, don't worry, because today I'm gonna tell you how I became the cool kid in town, starting with the mysterious element. As always, this is not a guide, you should never repeat what you're seeing here, it's dangerous, it might kill you, blah blah blah. This orange tube is copper metal. You might have seen it around if you ever done any plumbing, or some sort of outdoor activities. Hello. The first step in this process is to flatten it a little, only using a little force. Once flat, you can proceed to simply cut it in pieces. Simply cut it. Simply cut it. Now that we have it in a bunch of pieces, we can put it in a beaker and add some hydrochloric acid. After a while, you can see that nothing has changed. This is expected because copper is a relatively stable metal and the acid we've added is not able to oxidize it. For something to happen, we need to add an oxidizing substance, and in this case I have chosen potassium nitrate. However, one has to be careful because this reaction can be quite vigorous. In order to motivate those chemicals to actually do something, I decided to put everything on the hot plate. As things were warming up, you could see more and more bubbles being formed, as well as the solution getting greener and greener. Good. At some point you can notice some orange clouds forming on top of the beaker. This is called nitrogen dioxide. The only problem is that this gas is quite toxic, to say the least. Here's what I mean. This is called a fire diamond. It is a chemical standard that tells you how dangerous something is, and the number in the blue part tells you how bad for your health that thing is. The lower the better. And for this one, it is a 4. Out of 4. Not good. And as the bubbling was getting a bit too strong for my liking, I decided to turn off the heating to let it calm down a little. Except it didn't. What started to happen here is called a runaway reaction. Not because that's what your brain tells you to do, but because the reaction becomes self-sustained, which means that even if you cut the heat, it will just keep on going, exponentially. However, I had a plan in case things would go south. In fact, I would cover my green death juice beaker with an empty beaker, which would itself be placed in a larger one filled with water. This way, the fumes would get trapped in the empty beaker or would dissolve in the water below. Great! Except it didn't work. This is the day I die. Notice how it's happily bubbling away even though it's out of heat and put in cold water. Fortunately, things eventually calmed down and the reaction came to a halt. However, I kinda got into a little shitting myself moment afterwards, because I discovered that the symptoms of exposure to that gas are not felt straight away, but rather come later, and your lungs can fill with fluids and this can cause death, so yay me. Once again, don't do it. Anyways, this is what I was left with. In black is the level of the inside beaker. However, you can see that the level of the water that was used in the trap has risen far above it, suggesting a loss in internal pressure. And here's what happened when I removed the beaker. Now you can see that the solution is black and opaque, while I expected either a green or a blue one. However, here's what happens when you add water to it. And some more. This effect is likely due to a change of substitution from chlorides to water, and if you want to learn more about it, make sure to ask someone in the comments. Hey, by the way, these videos take a lot of time and effort to make, so if you like what I do, please consider dropping me a like and subscribing. Thanks! Okay, so having tested it at small scale first, all that's left to do now is do exactly the same thing with the big batch, and everything should be the same, right? Of course not, because even though it's blue, this time it's opaque and not clear. But why? After letting everything settle, I found that I had a white precipitate at the bottom of my beaker. I then took a slight tangent to this project in order to try to identify what that precipitate was. I then proceeded to filter it and wash it a few times, and I was quite surprised to see that it would quickly turn green even though it was white. This, coupled to the fact that it was poorly soluble in water, made me think that could well be copper-1 chloride. To test this, I scraped what I could and put it on a piece of steel, and then decided to torch it. Seeing it was giving off some very nice blue-green flame, and that the powder would turn either black or red, I came to the conclusion that it was indeed copper-1 chloride. What I wasn't expecting, however, was that when removing all the residues, I would be left with some very nice copper-plated steel. And so, if I have just discovered a new and very inefficient way to plate steel with copper, I wish to be remembered in history as what I truly am. A visionary. Anyways, going back to the main endeavor, I have now prepared a sodium hydroxide solution and I'm going to shoot our blue solution in it. A precipitate immediately formed, and it's supposed to be copper-2 hydroxide. However, it's supposed to be blue, and it's green, so wrong color, as it's often the case here at Overly Active. Fortunately, upon correcting the pH, the color changed from green to a nice blue-green typical of copper-2 hydroxide. Once settled, the precipitate was collected and sulfuric acid was added to it. The color quickly turned from light blue to deep blue, and what we've just made is called copper-2 sulfate. Once everything got dissolved, I put the whole blue solution in a glass tray and let it dry. But this happened. Just a little spill. Fortunately, I was able to recover most of it. Over the course of several days, the solution slowly evaporated and eventually some crystals started to appear and then grew to a surprisingly decent size. I then scooped them out of solution and dried them on the side. Now just take a look at that. Okay, so these are nice blue crystal and all, and that's cool. However, here's the breakthrough. I then discovered that if you take some of those little plastic bags and fill them with the thing, and then start handing them out on the street, everybody wants to be your friend. Heck, I even made some new friends online. Check this out. Isn't that cool? And also... FBI, open up! The eyes that you...